Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome back to Elite Dangerous. It's been nearly half a decade since the release of the last expansion for Elite Dangerous. Horizons launched all the way back in 2015, and almost ever since many people have been wondering what the next expansion would be. 5 years ago, a lot of people, me included, assumed that Elite would receive an expansion every year following an iterative design path. Although there have been many updates throughout the years, often bringing changes and improvements to the game, none of them have reached the levels many people were expecting, namely atmospheric planets and space legs. Anyway, here we are, many years later, and the second major expansion for the game is now not all that far away. In fact, we can expect an announcement from Frontier on this subject within the next few months. Two big questions stand out right now. What will it be, and why did it take so long? The second question is still very pertinent to a lot of people, especially those who purchased the Lifetime Pass back in 2014 and 2015. It's a question that is more or less impossible to answer, but we will briefly take a look at it anyway. So I feel it's reasonable to suspect that development hit some snags around the release of The Engineers, which was update 2.1, and the first update that suffered any real delay. It finally released in May of 2016, and at this point many people were still expecting the Horizon season to complete within 1 year, and I know I certainly was as well. However, Horizons took nearly 2 years to complete, with the final part arriving in September of 2017. The PlayStation 4 version of Elite Dangerous was being developed during this time, and I personally would be willing to bet that the port caused problems with the development, resulting in compromises to the game overall, as well as to some of the delays as well. And further, I doubt that the consoles are purely to blame for all of this. It's worth keeping in mind the PC minimum requirements for Elite. Horizons has a minimum GPU spec of a GTX 470, which is now a 10-year-old graphics card, and was already 5 years old when Horizons were released. The initial release of Horizons did indeed have a number of performance issues on low-spec PCs, which, if I'm remembering correctly here, and there's no guarantee of that, but I'm pretty sure, resulted in numerous changes being made to the planet generation in order to improve performance. Major plague, anyone? Bottom line, and this is just my speculation, I wouldn't be surprised if hardware requirements caused some of the delays for development, at least for the delays in 2016 through to 2018. But either way, it's something that we will never know the answer to. What we do know is that things have taken far longer than most people would have liked. Moving on though, it seems pretty obvious in the early days that Frontier expected to be able to expand Elite at a fairly rapid pace. And although there were always the conditional statements saying nothing is guaranteed, it certainly wasn't an always radio silence situation. Early newsletters released during the original beta period would occasionally look to the future. A newsletter number 29 specifically said the following: "We do intend to release small free updates after launch, but expansions that include significant new features and content will be charged for separately. For example, our current roadmap is to add, in no particular order, landing, driving around, prospecting on airless rocky planets, moons and asteroids, walking around interiors and competitive boarding on other ships, combat and other interactions with other players and AIs in the internal areas of starports, accessing richly detailed planetary surfaces, and the availability of giant executive-controlled ships to players." So, since the release of that letter, 2 points can be ticked off. That is the landing on airless rocky planets, as well as the availability of giant executive-controlled ships. The third point, arguably accessing richly detailed planetary surfaces, may have already been delivered depending on whether you personally class the current planets as richly detailed. My opinion on that though is that richly detailed planetary surfaces was referring to atmospheric worlds. Of course, we should keep in mind that those original outlines were released over 5 years ago now, and things do change. In fact, I would go as far to say that things certainly have changed with the original approach to the roadmaps and intents for the game, and we're now in a pretty much a different place to we were back then. But let's work with what we have. The outstanding points from newsletter 29 are walking around interiors and competitive boarding of other ships, combat and other interactions on starports, as well as the accessing rich planet surfaces. Let's keep tripping over that one. Now, newsletter 29 isn't the only place all of this has been mentioned. last year's leak also mentioned walking around and FPS combat. At this point, I kind of feel that it's reasonable to conclude that that's indeed what's coming. And let's not forget that the leak also mentioned base building. Additionally, there's been a number of data dumps recently using information lifted directly from the game's files, that's from the Fleet Carrier's beta, and data mining of course is very much against Frontier's EULA, and not to mention that quite a lot of people actively dislike it. So I'm going to respect that. I'll not go into too much details in this video, but I do want to talk about it briefly. If you happen to find this type of thing a spoiler, or if you'd prefer not to know, then do stop watching the video now. On screen, you can see a recent Reddit post containing information found by Commanders Dmitry, Daniel, Sergei, Vladimir and Peter, and apologies if I pronounced any of those names wrong. Keep in mind that some of this information was also found in previous builds going back to 2019. Added to that, Yamix previously made a detailed video on earlier data dumps before the recent one. So I'm only going to focus on one point here, which is the reference to a turbo lift with interiors, doors, buttons, hangars, terminals and station interiors. Whilst this of course isn't confirmation of anything at all, I do believe it's pretty compelling, especially when taken alongside previous leaks as well as the 2014 newsletter. At this point then, I'd be kind of surprised if the next era update didn't involve walking around in at least some form or other. What this might mean for the game though is anyone's guess, and I'm still very hopeful for atmospheric planets, which is something I've wanted to see since day one, although I'm kind of unconvinced that atmospheric planets will ever actually be a thing, but let's wait and see. For me, the real meat of the question right now then isn't so much what will the next update be, but what should it be? I've always loved the idea of space games for the ability to fly spaceships. One of the most interesting parts for that for me, specifically with Frontier Elite 2, was the ability to land on any type of planet, whether that was atmospheric or otherwise, to leave mining drones to do their thing and then return days later to collect the results. Frontier have often said that atmospheric planets would one day be a thing, and indeed the richly detailed planetary services point from newsletter 29 has always, to me at least, suggested that this would one day be a thing indeed. If Frontier releases both atmospheric worlds and space legs, then that will be great. Given a choice though, I know which one I would go for. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, so do let me know. What would you like to see in the next update? Again, hopefully we should be hearing about this within the next few months. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.